Alrighty guys, welcome to the Middle Ages Unit study session. I'm going to go over the study guide. The test is on Thursday, April 30th, and it's over chapters 17 and 18. First thing you want to know is what is topography. It refers to the shape and elevation of the land. And different topographies cause cities to develop in different ways, because if you think about it, cities that are located by the sea, a low topography by the sea, are going to be different than cities that are located in the mountains. So different topographies result in cities that develop different ways of life. Geographic features, just want to note that the Alps are the tallest mountain range in Europe. What is Eurasia? Eurasia is the large landmass that includes both Europe and Asia. Europe and Asia are two different continents, but they are connected, and we call that landmass Eurasia. Compare and contrast monks and friars. Both monks and friars are members of religious orders. However, one thing that is different about them is that monks lived in monasteries and friars live on the streets. What is a monastery? A monastery is a community of monks. At monasteries, they provide shelter for travelers, care for the sick, created illuminated manuscripts, they ran schools, they copied books, they studied ancient texts. Okay, so those are the things you want to know that are done at monasteries. Who is Charlemagne? Charlemagne was the leader of the Franks. He reunited Europe and was crowned the first Holy Roman Emperor. He worked with the Pope to do that, so he had the approval of the Pope. Charlemagne's accomplishment, he thought religion and education were very important. He spread education by building schools. He wanted to gain great power in Europe as well. Why was Europe considered unsafe during the Middle Ages? Europe was unsafe because there were invaders like the Vikings, the Magyars, and the Muslims. All those attacks made the Middle Ages unsafe. Number 9, what was the economic system of the Middle Ages and what was the social system of the Middle Ages? The economic system was manoralism, or the manor system. In the manor system was how the manor worked. Knights allowed peasants to run the farm land on the large estates, and in return the peasants had to give knights food or other payment. So the manors were like their own little villages. There was a church, and it was its whole little economic system, and they didn't really depend on any other manors. Everything you needed was within your own manor. The social system of the Middle Ages was feudalism, and that was the system of promises that governed the relationships between the lords and vassals. Number 9, what led to the rise of feudalism and what led to the decline? Things like strong central governments collapsing because there were so many invaders, and so the nobles got more powerful. And then William the Conqueror brought feudalism to Britain. And decline of feudalism was the Crusades, because kings' powers increased and the nobles weakened, because everybody left the manors. Knights went to fight in the Crusades. And also the 100 Years' War leads to the downfall of the Crusades, because the common people get more power, and in England the kings lose power. So define feudalism and who brought feudalism to Britain. Feudalism is a system of promises that govern the relationships between lords and vassals. William the Conqueror brought feudalism to Britain. This is important for you to know, that feudalism depended on the promises between lords and vassals. Okay, I want to reiterate that idea. Increases in trade led to the growth of cities, because if you think about it, people would meet in the market in the cities to trade. So now more people would start to live in the cities, like merchants, because that's where you would go to get the things you needed. So compare and contrast feudalism in Europe and Japan. Both had classes and promises between those classes. Both were based on land. They both had we had those triangles comparing them. So they both had classes, but the people in those classes were different. This is from to contrast feudalism in Europe and Japan. People who had the greatest power were the kings, nobles, knights, and peasants. So that's in Europe. And then in Japan, the people with the most power was the emperor, and then there's shogun, daimyo, samurai, peasants, and merchants. So you're definitely going to want to know the order of those people in each. That is one of the questions you need to know. What was the relationship like between popes and kings during the Middle Ages? They often came into conflict with each other and they struggled for power. Define crusades and what was the goal of the crusades? The crusades were holy wars between Muslims and Christians. The goal was to gain control of the Holy Land. The Holy Land was that area that included Jerusalem that so many religions found as important. And then who did Pope Urban call to join the Crusades? He called on crusaders to join the Crusades. And he called on them to join the fight because the Seljuk Turks were threatening the Byzantine Empire. And the Byzantine Emperor was nervous and he asked for help from the Pope. And so the Pope told the crusaders to join the fight against the Muslims. So in what ways were the Crusades successful? They established trade between Muslims and Christian lands. So it promoted trade between these two areas. It increased demand for goods from the East, from the Muslims. And it spread Muslim inventions like math, science, and medicines because the Crusaders went to these Muslim lands, started using these things and learning about these Muslim inventions and brought them back. So now Europeans wanted to use these things. So it promoted trade. In the Middle Ages, life revolved around the church, period. Art in the Middle Ages had religious themes. The church even determined what kind of art that was created. So number 19, what are characteristics of Gothic architecture? Flying buttresses, those are the things that hold up the walls because the walls are so high and so are the ceilings. They look like arches on the outside of the buildings. Stained glass windows is another characteristic of Gothic architecture, and also high walls and ceilings. Number 20, define Magna Carta. And what was the purpose of the Magna Carta? Magna Carta is Great Charter. It's a document listing the laws the king could not ignore. The purpose was to limit the king's power. What ideas does the U.S. get from the Magna Carta? The idea of habeas corpus, or right to trial by jury, is something that the U.S. government borrowed from the Magna Carta. The idea of constitutional law, or that you write down your laws in a document. And then representative government, because the Magna Carta created Parliament, which is a group of representatives that represents the people. And we also have that idea of a representative government because we have Congress, which is a group of people that represents the common people. So who was Joan of Arc? She led the French to victory in the 100 Years' War. Number 23, what was the political effects of the 100 Years' War for France and England? In England, the power of Parliament was increased, and that was because the king had to ask Parliament for money for the war, and because he depended on them, that made Parliament more powerful. So in England, the power of Parliament increased as a result of the 100 Years' War. However, in France, the king increased power, and that was because the king and the nobles all united against England. So the power of the monarchy or the king grew as a result of the 100 Years' War. Make sure you have those two correct, that you don't get those two mixed up. So how was the Black Death spread? Remember, the Black Death was a plague that swept through Europe. It was spread by fleas on rats. How many people died as a result of the Black Death? That'd be 25 million. And what was the Inquisition? The Inquisition was the effort to rid Spain of all religions that were not Christianity. Remember, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella got together officials that led the Inquisition to kick out all people who were not Christians. They were put on trial, some were put in jail, and some were even killed. One thing I added that you did not have on yours was about excommunication. Make sure you know what excommunication is. It's that it's kicking out anybody out of the church. The Pope has this power of excommunication, and then people were really afraid of excommunication because if you were excommunicated, then you were kicked out of the church, and they thought you wouldn't go to heaven then. So people really feared being excommunicated. Okay, guys, I knew I kind of flew through that, but please comment below if you have any questions. I'd be happy to help, and I will be on this throughout the evening. So if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, good luck studying.